Hey guys, yesterday, I think it was, there was news that got out that said that Hugo Weaving wanted to return to the role of the Red Skull. Now, I for one would be happy to see that because so far, all of the villains in Marvel productions, whilst the movies have been great, the villains haven't really stood out. We've had Malekith, we've had Ronin, we've had Ultron, and none of them really were so menacing as a character like the Red Skull and Loki. Those two are the only two villains that really stood out, and those two are the only two I can think I want to see them back on the big screen. Now, Hugo Weaving was talking about how he loves the role and how he wants to return, and how, he never really said how he could do it, but I sort of thought about it myself, and there is theories that I have that could bring back the Red Skull. Now, firstly, there's the fact that he's inside the Tesseract. So last we saw him when we got sucked into the Tesseract. And there's nothing to say he's fully dead to say, because, like, we never saw him die. At the same time, though, there's not been any mention of Red Skull since then. So, well, apart from Winter Soldier, where Arnim Zola sort of had a passable mention of him, but the fact that he's still around in his little computer system, or was still around, sort of says that Red Skull could be lurking around somewhere. Now, that leads me on to another theory which I heard before, which is that all of the villains could be brought back by Thanos. Obviously, Ultron, Vision destroyed the last Ultron bot, but there's nothing to say one didn't manage to escape, and Ultron's still lurking around there somewhere, and that Thanos has got his hands on him. Also, Malekith, we saw him sort of get sucked into the ether. Didn't see him die. Same thing with Red Skull. Ronin, there was the Power Stone. So all of these are sort of stones that Thanos will be getting his hands on, and we've seen in the teaser trailer for Infinity War that he has all the stones in the gauntlet, and we saw him with the gauntlet at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron, which, Ultron was one of the villains that I mentioned. He was in that movie, so that could lead into something. And we saw him in Odin's throne room, where we know the Tesseract is, or we know it's in Asgard anyway, because it was taken there at the end of the first Avengers movie. So there are sort of little hints that this could eventually happen. So I'm thinking, Thanos could resurrect them using the stones and bring them back. Obviously, the one stone he doesn't have is the Mind Stone, which is in Vision's head. But that leads me on to yet another, not really theory. It's more of a sort of, it's the most obvious of the things you could talk about here. And that's the fact that Vision will die. But there's nothing to say he will die, because in Captain America Civil War, he said that he doesn't know what the stone is, and that maybe someday he could control it. So what I'm thinking is, Thanos will sort of take over his mind with the Mind Stone, but Vision will snap out of it, and Thanos will take the stone from his head, but then Vision will still remain the person he is because he's learned to control it. I don't know. I don't know how they could work around that, but a big sort of thing that people are thinking about is Vision going to die in Avengers Infinity War? I hope not, because he is probably one of the best characters so far in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He has some of the best scenes. He really did stand out in Avengers Age of Ultron. He was really good in Captain America Civil War, and I want to see a lot more from him in the future. So I hope that's not the case, but I would like to see what I mentioned before with Thanos maybe bringing back the villains that we never really got to see properly, because people like Ronin, he was sort of Thanos' messenger boy, and Malekith literally did nothing. He was there to pose some sort of threat to Thor, but he didn't really pose any sort of threat. It was more a Loki film than a Malekith film. So things like that make me sort of think, maybe we could see these villains again. I'd like to see them again, like to see them stand out, but I'm not going to bank on it. But the whole Vision thing seems kind of likely. I think it's more likely that he won't die because of the amount of people that like him and the amount of people that respect him as a character. But there's always that chance, and it's a fairly big chance. It's sort of a 50-50 here, but I'm going to bank on the fact that he's not going to die. But anyway, that leads me on to another death that could possibly happen, and that is the death of Captain America. As we know, in the comics, if you haven't read the comics, then spoilers, but obviously spoilers for the movie as well, but I'm sure everyone's seen the movie by now. Anyway, so Captain America, we know that in the comics he was killed by accident by Tony Stark, and he feels really bad for it. And that, Captain America was replaced at two different points by, well, probably more than two different points, but at two different points by Bucky Barnes and the Falcon. Falcon is the current Captain America. So that leads it on to maybe the death of Captain America happening, because what makes me think it is likely is the fact that at the end of Captain America Civil War, they built this whole story around Bucky Barnes and how Cap, respects Bucky Barnes and all that sort of stuff. And this is like two theories in one here, the death of Captain America being one and Bucky Barnes being another. That, yeah, at the end of Captain America Civil War, Bucky was frozen like Captain America was in the first Avenger, and how he was found sort of by Nick Fury to join the Avengers, and he was unfrozen and all that sort of stuff. And doing the exact same story with Bucky here. They had him turned into a super soldier and brainwashed and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, Cap wasn't brainwashed, but the Bucky story is similar to Cap's story in the way that they ended it in Captain America Civil War. So I'm thinking it's most likely going to be Bucky, plus Sebastian Stan has signed on for about 7 movies, and I think he's done 3 so far. So I'm expecting him to show up in Black Panther, because obviously he's being kept in Wakanda right now, even if it's just a little cameo, or even if he's just frozen in the movie and you don't see him do anything, he's just sort of in animation, suspended animation. But I'm thinking maybe Bucky will replace Cap if they do go down that storyline. It'd be a bold storyline to do. Everyone's a big fan of Captain America now. I love Captain America, as you can see, but it's interesting to sort of look at it in that way, because at the end of Civil War, Captain America laid down his shield. Tony Stark was like, that shield doesn't belong to you, that was my father's shield, and he drops the shield, and that's him. It was confirmed that that was him, sort of stepping down from the role of Captain America. There's also Sam Wilson, who could take on the role. Don't think it's as likely, because I think the Falcon really stands on his own as a character, and I love him as a character. There was some really cool fan art of Sam Wilson in full Captain America gear, which I really liked. But I think it's more likely going to be Bucky than Sam in the end. But there's nothing to rule either of them out. That's just my sort of thoughts on the sort of, will he be replaced, will he not be replaced? They might not even kill him at all. I mean, it has been confirmed Chris Evans will appear in Infinity War, but that could be his death. It could be flashbacks. I think it's more likely going to be maybe just Steve Rogers. And there is sort of another thing you could say, that Steve Rogers could not be killed. He could still be alive. And that he'll be aged like he is in the comics. But in those comics, I've got Axis, and he sort of commands from behind the scenes. But Falcon's Captain America. So either way, it could still go one of two ways. And Bucky has his own sort of character arc and his own sort of story arc. So it's not a definite thing. But it's just, again, a thought and a theory. So, there's also another death that could happen. They could reverse the roles and have Steve accidentally kill Tony Stark, because Tony went down an emotional journey in Captain America Civil War. I felt really bad for Tony. Obviously, I'm Team Cap all the way. I love Captain America. But I felt really, really bad for Tony throughout the entire movie. And they could go down the route where it ends up being Tony that dies, because obviously Robert Downey Jr. is saying he's getting too old for the role, or if they make an Iron Man 4, it won't be Robert Downey Jr. in the role, which I don't want anyone to replace Robert Downey Jr. If they did, this would be a good thing to do, sort of have the death of Tony Stark instead of the death of Captain America. It would affect Captain America in a big way, and that would be interesting to see how he copes with it and how it all happens. I mean, Tony set off the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was the staple. He's like the big one that set off the entire universe. So if they kill him off, it'll be, again, a very bold move. And everyone probably, well, he's probably most people's favourite character in this series. So it would be a very bold move, but I can see it happening again, because I think Robert Downey Jr. kind of feels like he wants to move on, or he's getting too old for the role and he wants to do the character justice. So would make sense. And then you've got Thor Ragnarok and Guardians of the Galaxy, which is the last two I'll talk about, which seem the most likely films to when Thanos will appear again. Obviously, there's Doctor Strange coming out. I don't think we'll see Thanos in that unless it's a post-credit scene. But It seems most likely that Thanos will appear in either Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor. Guardians of the Galaxy comes out sooner, and obviously Thanos was in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. But then James Gunn was saying that this is sort of a standalone movie that doesn't really lead into much of the next steps in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, again, it's like a 50-50 thing, but I can see him appearing in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 at least, and I can see maybe the events leading, like maybe James Gunn was just saying that to sort of take our attention away from it and make it feel like he wasn't gonna set up the next movie when actually it's gonna be a big surprise. Like we got Star-Lord's father coming up, and maybe that could lead into something. I don't know. There's plenty of theories you can talk about with Guardians of the Galaxy, but I'll just say that I think they're going to appear in the movie because it's confirmed that Chris Pratt will be in Infinity War. I don't see him being in it without the other Guardians, but then I don't want the film to be too overcrowded either, because Captain America: Civil War was quite overcrowded. I mean, you have new characters that joined, like Spider-Man, and then you've got obviously Scarlet Witch. You've got well, probably more characters coming up, such as Miss Marvel. So I don't want it to get too overcrowded with like a clusterfuck of characters, but I'd like to see the Guardians at least appear, and the events of Thor Ragnarok as well. That one's sort of going to be a more cosmic-based movie. You've obviously got the Planet Hulk storyline taking place, and that could lead into something. I think Ragnarok is probably, that's like the downfall of Asgard, and maybe that will be brought to the Earth, and maybe it could even be Thanos who starts off the whole thing, because obviously Thor had the visions of the Infinity Stones in Avengers Age of Ultron, which it was an out of place scene, but if they explain it in Thor Ragnarok and it turns out that Thanos is actually the cause of all the Thor's pain, and then he brings all that to Earth, and then it gives Thor an excuse to go back to Earth and fight for the Earth, and it gives him more of a fleshed out story, and it gives the Hulk more of a reason to return to Earth, because obviously he's got his doubts and he thinks that he's the cause of all the pain of people on Earth. It gives him a reason to go back to save all these people and redeem himself. So it seems very likely that Thor Ragnarok is going to be the big one where Thanos shows up and starts, taking over and doing the Thanos type things he's going to do. Plus, it seems the most likely place where we'll see more Infinity Stones because they're in Asgard. A lot of them are in Asgard. So that's the one that I think will lead into Avengers Infinity War, and I cannot wait for all of these films I've mentioned. But I think Thor Ragnarok's going to be the big one before Infinity War, where we get jacked up, and I think the post-credit scene is going to be crazy for that one. So that's all of my thoughts and theories on Infinity War, including Hugo Weaving and all that sort of stuff. I just, hearing that made me think, hey, there could be other stuff, and I started thinking over this stuff, and it's like, here we are talking about them. So let me know what your thoughts are going to be on why do I keep saying Captain America? On Avengers Infinity War, and let me know, are you excited for the movie? Are you jacked up to see Thanos? And I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.